I don't know about you guys, but I am a little bit scared of the ocean. It's deep, there's giant creatures in it, and I could possibly get stung by a jellyfish. Now, I'll normally still go in the ocean if the opportunity presents itself, but after today's video, I probably will never step foot in the ocean again.
The ocean is really deep.
Yes,
Deeper,
it is.
In fact, than most of us realize. If you were to shave off all of the land from the tops of every continent and island in the world and fill up the ocean's deepest points with that land, then the entire Earth would be covered in an ocean 2 miles deep.
Is that real? Are you kidding me right now? So you're telling me that if we just Minecraft mined up every single block on planet Earth and we shoved it into every single trench that's underwater, like if we filled up the Mariana Trench, for instance, which is 7 miles deep, by the way, that we would all be 2 miles under the surface of the sea. That is insane.
3/4 of our planet is already covered in water, though, and it goes a lot deeper than just 2 miles. Let's start with a sense of scale. This dot right here is the size of an average human.
That's me.
This slightly larger dot is the size of an elephant.
That's my roommate.
This is the size of the largest ship ever built.
Okay, I love how they're just so zoomed out to show how big the ocean is compared to these little things. Like, that's a human, that's an elephant, and they have the biggest ship on planet Earth just chilling at the top of the ocean, and it looks tiny. Like, it is only covering up a small percentage of the screen right now, and the rest of the screen is only a small percentage of the actual ocean.
Knock Nevis. With that in mind, let's start going underwater and see what we find out.
Okay.
The first milestone is at 40 meters below the surface, which is the maximum depth allowed for recreational scuba diving. A little further down at 93 meters is where the wreck of the Lusitania was discovered, which is interesting because the Lusitania itself is 240 meters long, which means that it sank in water shallower than it is long, so if the ship was standing on its stern or bow, it would be sticking out of the water. Just slightly deeper than that, at 100 meters, is where diving can become seriously fatal if you're not careful because of decompression sickness. But that didn't stop a man named Herbert Nitsch to accomplish the free diving world record at a depth of 214 meters.
Are you kidding me? This guy, this absolute legend of a man, went past double the point where you're not supposed to go. 100 meters is already like super deep, but he decided, no, I'm gonna go deeper. I'm gonna go 150 meters. I'm gonna go 200 meters. I'm going to go 214 meters. A blue whale could have came out of nowhere and joned him. He literally could have got eaten by a blue whale.
This guy swam down to this level with just one single breath. But a little further down at 332 meters, we have the scuba diving world record, which was accomplished by another man named Ahmed Gabir. If he had swam down another 111 meters, then he would have reached the height of the Empire State Building if it was submerged underwater. And a little further than that, at 500 meters below the surface, we arrive at the maximum dive depth of blue whales.
Okay, a blue whale, like literally the biggest creature on planet Earth, can only go down 500 meters. That should be the limit of the ocean. That's where the sand should be. Nothing should be able to go deeper than that. If the biggest animal on planet Earth can't go down past that, other creatures should not be able to go past that.
Largest creatures on the planet, and also the limit of the US Seawolf class nuclear submarine. At 535 meters, we can witness the maximum dive depth of emperor penguins, and this is when we must bring up the intensity of water pressure. At this level below the surface, the water pressure exerted on a person, or the penguins, would be roughly equivalent to a polar bear standing on a quarter.
What does that even mean? A polar bear standing on a quarter? Is that just like, so if I was the size of a quarter and I guess like a polar bear was standing on top of me, like that's probably what it means. That level of weight on like such a tiny object would be extremely painful. I don't know why they use that analogy because it's kind of weird. Nobody will ever understand what it's like for a polar bear to stand on a quarter, but I'm guessing it's probably the same as a Tyrannosaurus Rex standing on an average sized human being.
So further down the depths at 830 meters would be the height of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest building in the world. Once we hit 1,000 meters below the surface, we begin to enter the scary zone. Light from the surface can no longer reach beyond this point, so the rest of the ocean below is shrouded in permanent darkness. On top of that, the water pressure you would experience at this point would be about the same as if you were standing on the surface of the planet Venus, meaning that you would die very quickly. You would also meet the giant squid at this sea level if the water...
Not only is the pressure going to kill you, but like if you're down there, let's say in a submarine, you could come across one of the weirdest creatures that they literally used to write novels about. Like they used to talk about this thing like it was fake. This thing would literally like destroy ships. They've made movies about this thing, and you can find it 1,000 meters below the surface of the ocean.
Water pressure didn't already kill you. At 1,280 meters, we reach the maximum depth dived to by the leatherback sea turtle, and further down at 1,828 meters, we would reach the deepest part of the Grand Canyon were it to be underwater with us.
Wow.
Down at 2,000 meters, we start to encounter some of the more terrifying sea creatures, like the ominously named black dragonfish, a carnivorous beast with a stomach that doesn't allow light to be emitted through it. Meaning that since we're in total darkness underwater at this point, the only way you would ever see this thing is with a
Oh! All right, that thing is horrible. That thing is like nightmare fuel. I thought it was maybe an anglerfish, but no, its eye is the only thing that lights up. The rest of it is just in pure darkness, and it literally has teeth that looks like it went to the store and bought vampire teeth. That is horrible.
Flashlight. A little further down at 2,250 meters, we would reach the maximum depth dived to by both sperm whales and the very frightening colossal squid. Sperm whales often
squids?
have sucker marks and scars left on their bodies from battles with the colossal squid that likely take place at these incredible depths.
You're telling me that these two giant beasts are battling at 2,250 meters in pure darkness, by the way. They can't see a thing, and they're just duking it out. They're just fighting each other. The squid is grabbing onto the whale. The whale's doing whatever it does. I don't even know what sperm whales do, but they're just down there just battling. And we have no idea.
The squids themselves can grow to be 14 meters long and weigh up to 750 kilograms with eyes the size of a dinner plate and razor-sharp sickles in the middle of their tentacles.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, good luck with that down there. Way further down at 3,800 meters, we can find the wreck of the RMS Titanic. And a bit past that, at 4,000 meters, we start to enter the abyssal zone of the ocean. Water pressure is at an astonishing 11,000 pounds per square inch down here, and there are numerous strange, almost alien-like creatures that inhabit these depths, such as the fangtooth, anglerfish, and viperfish.
So it seems like the theme is that the deeper you go into the ocean, the scarier the creatures get. Because, I mean, if you saw any three of these in, like, let's say your friend's dad's aquarium, you would probably run home screaming that they had a mythical beast inside of their aquarium. These things don't look like they're from this world. Like, the deeper you go into the ocean, the more alien the creatures get.
267 meters is the average depth of the ocean where you would normally expect to hit the floor, but there are parts of the ocean that go significantly deeper than even this. At 4,791 meters rests the wreckage of the battleship Bismarck sunk during World War II, and way down at 6,000 meters is the beginning of the Hadal Zone, named after the underworld Hades itself.
They literally named it after one of probably the worst places that you could think of.
The water pressure down at these depths can become 1,100 times what you would experience way back on top at the surface, which is roughly equal to an elephant balancing on a postage stamp or a single person carrying the weight of 50 Boeing 747 jumbo jets.
That's insane. Yeah, water pressure is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, it's literally like you are carrying all of the water that's above you. Like, it doesn't really make sense in my mind, and I don't think it ever will. But the fact that being that deep in the ocean is equivalent to 50 giant planes being on top of you, it just doesn't make sense.
Down at these depths, you would be crushed immediately without any outside protection, but life still exists down here in various strange forms.
How?
At 6,500 meters, we reach the maximum depth that the DSV Alvin can dive to, a popular research submarine that helped to discover the Titanic. Way further down at 8,848 meters below the surface, and we have arrived at the height of Mount Everest, where it to be upside down and placed underwater. And then way further past even that, at 10,898 meters, we arrive at the depth reached by James Cameron in 2012 during the Deep Sea Challenger mission. The deepest point in the ocean yet reached by humans was back in 1960, though, when two men named Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard reached a depth of 10,916 meters using their Trieste submarine.
That's so close. Look at that. Like, James Cameron in 2012 is probably punching the air right now, because he was what? He was like 18 meters away from being like in the record book as traveling the deepest in the ocean. Like, at that point, I don't know why they just didn't go deeper. I'm sure that it's extremely dangerous, but you gotta risk it, right? Like, you gotta go for that Guinness World Record.
It took them 5 hours to descend through the ocean to this depth, and they only stayed for 20 minutes before a window cracked and they began to resurface.
That would be horrifying, dude. Imagine if you're in a submarine and a window cracks. Like, what do? Do you just get some glue and you just start going crazy? I would personally grab some duct tape and then just cover up the window. I obviously wouldn't do anything, you know, I know that, but like, still, for peace of mind, I just wouldn't want to see it.
Just a bit further down from there at 10,972 meters, and we reach the average flight altitude of a commercial airliner. So if you've ever looked out of a window while on a flight and looked down to the ground, that's a very good sense of how incredibly deep down into the abyss that we are currently at.
I don't want to think about
when
it.
we hit 10,994 meters, we have hit the bottom of the known ocean called the Challenger Deep, right here on this map just about 300 kilometers southwest of Guam Island. However, it is believed that there are almost certainly even deeper parts of the ocean than this that just haven't been discovered yet. It wasn't until 1997, after all, that the Sirena Deep was discovered with a depth of 10,732 meters, making it the second deepest known point in the ocean. It is estimated that only about 5% of the ocean's floor has been accurately mapped, leaving the other 95% to be currently a mystery.
Yeah, I remember seeing a statistic that we've explored more of space, and I'm pretty sure we have a better understanding of space than we do of our own ocean. Like, that's how big and that's how deep our ocean is, which it doesn't make sense, bro. The scientists, they gotta get on that. They gotta figure out what we're living with, because we don't know what's at the bottom of the ocean. We should be able to figure it out. Like, what if there's a megalodon just swimming around? I need to know about these things.
So at some point in their lives, nearly everybody has wanted to dig a hole down to the center of the Earth. The only problem is, nobody ever has actually dug a hole down that far. This leads us to the question that this video is all about. If humanity decided that digging a hole was the #1 objective of our species, then how deep down could we actually dig with modern day technology? Let's say that we start somewhere on the Earth's surface and just start digging from there. Not too far down at 1.8 meters, and we arrive at the standard grave depth in Western culture, so if you're afraid of zombies, this is how far down they'll be coming from. 4 meters down, and we arrive at the depth that Pharaoh Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered at. A little further at 6 meters below the surface, we reach the maximum depth that metal detectors can pick up signals from.
Okay, before we get any further, I want you guys to comment down below 2 things. First, comment down below the deepest hole that you've ever dug. Secondly, comment down below how deep you think that we could possibly dig. I think the deepest hole that I've personally dug has been like 6 feet deep at the beach one time. And the deepest that I think anybody has ever dug in the history of Earth, I want to say like maybe 2,000 feet. I feel like we haven't gotten that deep down into the surface.
At 12 meters, we can find the deepest burrows dug by animals, the Nile crocodile.
I honestly didn't know that crocodiles burrow.
20 meters, and we arrive at the depth of the Paris catacombs beneath the city of Paris, a tomb that holds the remains of over 6 million people. Double that distance to 40 meters down, and we can see the deepest swimming pool in the world. If you drained this pool and jumped into it from the top, it would take nearly 3 seconds before you would hit the bottom. 100 meters down is the usual distance that governments bury their nuclear waste at. And just beneath that, at 105.5 meters down, is the deepest metro station in the world, located in Kiev. Moving on to 122 meters down, and we see the deepest known point that a plant's roots have ever reached.
You're telling me that plants have dug down 400 feet? That's so deep. Like, why are they down that low? What are they doing down there?
A fig tree in South Africa. 220 meters down, and we arrive at the deepest river in the world, the Congo River in Africa. Beyond that, at 240 meters, you can ride through the deepest railway tunnel in the world that
Okay, so people have still gone down past 787 feet.
Connects the Japanese islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. But at 287 meters down, you can drive through the deepest road tunnel in the world in Norway. 305 meters down, and you would still be vulnerable to the B-82 Earth-penetrating nuclear warhead, which can destroy structures up to this depth beneath the surface.
Okay, good to know.
Though, at 392 meters, we arrive at the deepest well and possibly deepest hole ever dug by hand.
Okay, so somebody has dug that by hand, which means that everything that we see that's past this has been dug by some sort of machine or explosive. That is insane that somebody actually dug by hand 1,286 feet. Imagine being out there just digging away like a dog. I wonder if that means like they dug with a shovel, like is that by hand? Or if they actually like use their hands to dig and claw. I'm going to say they probably used a shovel if I had to guess.
This is the Woodingdean water well in the UK, and it was dug all the way back in 1862. At 603 meters down, we arrive at something terrifying. The deepest vertical drop inside of a cave. If you were unfortunate enough to be in this cave and fall down this hole, the fall would be higher up than falling from the top of the One World Trade Center in New York. And the fall would take you over 11 seconds before hitting the bottom.
Imagine just walking around and then there's a giant hole in the ground. It's super dark so you can't see it. And you fall down a hole that is the length of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building made by man. How unfortunate would that be?
Even further down, though, at 700 meters is where the Chilean miners were trapped at for 69 days back in 2010. 970 meters down is the deepest hole ever dug that still has an open sky above it, the Bingham Canyon open pit mine in Utah. This pit is so deep that you could place the tallest building in the entire world in the center and still have over 100 more meters to the surface.
That's insane! Check it out. So at the bottom of that, it looks like maybe there's like some sort of like lake or pool, and then as you climb up, it's almost like a giant staircase that you can climb up, and it's so tall that towards the top, it actually gets so cold where it can snow. That just blows my mind.
Much further down at 1,410 meters, though, is where the deepest concert ever held happened by the band Agonizer in Finland. 1,642 meters down is the depth of the deepest lake on Earth, Lake Baikal in Russia. And
okay, no way somebody has actually gone deeper than that. 5,387 feet. There's no way that like a person has stood in a cave deeper than that.
1,857 meters down is the deepest part of the Grand Canyon.
Okay, that one doesn't necessarily like count in my opinion. Like obviously it is a canyon, so you're below sea level and it is in the earth technically, but it's different when there's a cave. When I can like see the sky, then I'm like, all right, this isn't that bad. You know, I don't feel like I am going to be trapped in here. I don't feel like, you know, it could fill up with water and I might die. I don't know. Does that make sense to you guys? Because for me, being in a cave that's that deep is a lot different than being in a Grand Canyon where like I can actually still see the sun above my body. And I guess like I can see the sky and the clouds and birds and stuff.
The deepest known cave on Earth is located 2,197 meters beneath the surface in Georgia. But the deepest hole that you could actually fall into goes way deeper than even this.
How?
All the way down at 3,132 meters is the bottom of the Moab Katsong mine shaft in South Africa.
Who is going down there? Seriously, dude? All right, I'm actually like getting goosebumps up and down my body. Who in their right mind is going down 2 miles?
Taking the elevator takes 4.5 minutes to reach the bottom.
You couldn't pay me enough money to go down there.
It would take you 25 entire seconds for you to hit the bottom and think about what you've just done.
That's like skydiving underground.
And miss an entire phone call. Even further down at 3,600 meters is the deepest point that a multicellular organism has been found alive. This freaky-looking worm. But human beings themselves have been even deeper than this.
Who wants to do that?
4,000 meters down is the deepest part of the deepest mine on Earth, also located in South Africa.
No. Whoever is doing that, they are not getting paid enough money. They are in the mines. And they like it could collapse at any point. There is 2.5 miles of earth. There's like stones, sand, people, buildings, animals all above you. How does that even work? How are they not getting crushed? How like isn't it collapsing in on itself?
The trip from the surface down to the bottom takes over an hour to complete, and the temperature at the bottom can reach a sweltering 66 degrees Celsius.
So you would think that it's actually going to be colder the deeper you go, because like anytime you're in a cave, generally speaking, in my experience, like it is kind of colder because you don't have the sunlight, and you know, it kind of just like stays the same temperature. That's why basements are typically like the same temperature year round. They're like a little bit cooler. But I guess since you're like 3 miles underneath sea level, it makes it super hot because you're getting closer to the Earth's surface, or not the surface, you're getting closer to the core of the Earth, which is all like magma, and it's basically like a miniature sun inside the Earth, and it's heating up everything on the outer part.
6,000 meters is the average depth of the oceanic crust beneath the ocean floor. Way down at 8,848 meters is the height of Mount Everest if it were placed underground instead. 10,994 meters down is the bottom of the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean.
Okay,
I
can
already
we even
covered
go lower?
the depth of the ocean in another video, but unbelievably, humans have actually dug down significantly deeper than even this. For reference about what's next, 11,887 meters is the average altitude that a commercial airliner flies at. But deeper than that, at 12,262 meters is the depth of the Kola Super Deep Borehole, a project where the Soviet Union attempted to drill all the way through the Earth's crust. They only reached a third of the way there, though, because the temperature at this depth reached 180 degrees Celsius.
Wow. That's honestly a super cool idea, and I'm kind of sad that they didn't keep going. That's like a dream for like a young kid. Like I remember being 5 years old and, you know, being on the beach, digging with my shovel. And I was like, how cool could it be if I could dig all the way through and then I could reach like China on the other side? But unfortunately, it does not seem like it's possible. And if I did try to do it, I would burn alive.
Which was too hot for the drill to continue operating any further. The hole is also only 23 centimeters wide, so luckily you can't accidentally fall into it.
That is insane. Look at all the area around it. Like, I wonder if they have, like, you know, put a fence around it or something. Like, it kind of looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. And even though they did bolt it shut, you're telling me that if I were to open that, I could drop something down 12,000 meters, like 6 miles. What?
If you dropped a quarter down the shaft, though, it would take about 50 seconds before it hit the bottom. Recently, however, this depth has been surpassed by the Z44 Shavio oil and gas well, which has drilled down to a depth of 12,376 meters. That's the equivalent of stacking 15 Burj Khalifas on top of each other, and currently represents the deepest hole that humanity has ever dug.
7.7
the crust, however,
miles.
can extend down to 70,000 meters below the Earth's surface, and the planet's center is located 6,371 kilometers down.
We probably
if the surface
go
of
there.
the Earth is Lisbon, Portugal, and the planet's center is Astana, Kazakhstan, then humanity so far has just ventured this tiny, insignificant distance. If you enjoyed the video that you just...
I honestly cannot believe that. That is the deepest hole that we can possibly dig. 7.7 miles, but to get just through the crust, we have to go 43 miles. And then after that, we're not even close to the core.
Many of us probably think that humans are everywhere on this planet.
There are
billions of us, and it seems like everywhere you look, there are other people. And there's no wild or wilderness left in the world, with everything being already discovered. But this is simply not the case. The world is an enormous place, and there are still places just as remote and far away as they were thousands of years ago. So then, how far away exactly can you possibly get from every other human on the planet?
Okay, I kind of want to make an educated guess. If I had to guess, it's going to be like some remote island in one of the like Pacific or Atlantic Oceans. Either that or the International Space Station. But if you guys have a guess, make sure you guys leave that in the comments section down below.
For the maximum terror factor, let's imagine that you have suddenly been teleported to the following locations, and then imagine how or if you would escape. Perhaps you still want to be around a few people, but far away from everybody else in the world, in which case you would likely want to visit the island of Tristan da Cunha, which is the most remote place in the world that is actually inhabited by people. The tiny island has a tiny population of just 264 people.
That's it, dude. Imagine you're on an island in the middle of the ocean and everybody else that's there, you can basically be friends with. 264 people is not a lot of people. That's like a small neighborhood worth of people. That's insane.
While you're there, the closest other population of humans will be located 2,000 kilometers away on the island of St. Helena, which itself is quite remote. The nearest continent to you would be Africa, which would be a staggering 2,400 kilometers away.
Okay, if you're living there, you gotta get rid of all your Amazon accounts. You're probably not gonna get Netflix. You might not even get internet connection all the way out in the middle of the ocean. So it's gonna be kind of difficult, especially if you're there. Also, how do they get there? There's probably not room for an airport, so you have to take a boat there.
There is no airport on the island, so the only way to or from is by boat, and boats only come from South Africa about 8 or 9 times in an entire year.
Imagine missing that boat. Literally imagine you're waiting at the port. You're like, all right, back home to my 263 other brothers and sisters. And you miss the boat, and you literally have to wait probably like another month until you're able to get the boat back to this most remote island in the entire world.
If you really want off the island, then you better have your own boat, and even then, the shortest journey to the nearest airport on Ascension Island would take you 7 days.
They're just circling random spots in the middle of the ocean. Like, at least with St. Helena, you can kind of see a little blip. Oh no, actually, that's just like a spit spot on my screen. Never mind.
Now let's next imagine that you are placed in the center of Devon Island, which is part of the Canadian archipelago. This island is roughly the same size as Croatia, and yet it has absolutely 0 people living on it. Nobody. It's just you and complete solitude with nobody else as far as the land goes.
I mean, it makes kind of a little bit of sense considering when you look at that, there's no things that would be out there. There's probably like mountain goats. There's not even any trees. I'm guessing it's probably too cold for anything to live there.
Walk in any direction and you will never find anybody else to help you. The closest other humans to you would be here on the island next door in the town of Resolute, population 229, which is every single person who lives on the island. But even still, the town is 80 kilometers away from the island that you're on, and you would need a boat to get there.
Yeah.
Maybe you think that the South Pole would have to be one of the most remote and far away places in the world.
That
and
is
while
true.
that used to be true, the South Pole today is home to a permanent research station that is always staffed by as many as 150 scientists.
Oh, wow.
The place in Antarctica that is far more remote and difficult to get to or out of would be this exact spot here, which is the furthest point on the continent away from the ocean. It is located 878 kilometers away from the research station at the South Pole, which would be the nearest other humans to your location. You may find some solace that there is at least already shelter pre-built here, although most of it has been buried under the snow. The Soviets first reached this place in 1958 and built a bust of Lenin facing towards Moscow, which is the only thing that still stands today above the snow, gazing into the vast nothingness in every direction.
Imagine you're just walking along South Pole areas and you're kind of just looking, and then you see like what looks like it's a human being from really far away. I'm sure people are like, wait a second, that might be another human. And then you start getting closer and then you realize it's just a statue of Lenin. That's so sad and disappointing.
The last time that humans ever visited this point was back in 2011, so unless you want to wait around for years to be rescued, then you should probably get moving to that South Pole research station.
I wonder where Mr. Beast was.
This isn't the most remote piece of land on Earth. That distinction has to go to this island in the South Atlantic called Bouvet Island.
Bouvet
It is
Island.
small, frozen with ice, and completely uninhabited by all of humanity, although
I wonder why.
For some unknown reason. The nearest other piece of land to you would be Queen Maud Land here off the coast of Antarctica at 1,600 kilometers away, but that island is also uninhabited, so there's no use going there. The nearest other humans to you on Bouvet Island would be 2,260 kilometers away on Tristan da Cunha, which, as we previously discussed, is also incredibly remote in its own right.
Yeah, they really don't have any people.
That distance would be about 54% of the distance from the west coast of the United States to the east coast, with no other humans in sight, and just to arrive at the most remote inhabited place on Earth that still has no airport and that only has boats come to it 8 or 9 times a year.
That would be so disappointing. Let's say you get stranded on that island, the Bouvet Island or whatever, and somehow, some way, you make a boat. Maybe you make a boat out of like the ice cubes that are on that island. I don't know. I don't know what you're gonna do. But let's say, theoretically, you make a boat, you somehow know that the Tristan da Cunha is the only spot that has people, and you're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna travel days and days and days, thousands of miles, and then you get there, and you realized you just missed the boat to get back to Africa. I just can't even fathom how disappointing that might be.
So far, we've only been talking about being on land, but we haven't yet considered the ocean. If we forget about distance and just think about the sheer obstacles between you and every other person, then the bottom of the Marianas Trench, nearly 11 kilometers below the ocean's surface, would be a truly lonely place. Only 3 people have ever been to the bottom in all of human history, and the last time was in 2012. Strangely, that does mean that there have been 4 times as many people that have been on the surface of the moon than have been to the bottom of the ocean. But let's take it back to distance for a moment, because the ocean is truly gargantuan and far bigger than many of us realize. This point in the Arctic Ocean, for example, is the furthest point in that ocean away from any land. It is located on a shifting pack of ice, so a permanent structure is impossible to build. If you were to ever reach here, the closest inhabited land would be Ellesmere Island in Canada, home to a population of only 146 people.
Who are these people living up there? Honestly, like the northern islands of Canada seems like it's really lonely up there. I don't know who's living up there, but for whatever reason, over 100 people decided to live up there.
The closest actual settlement on that island, Grisefjord, would be 1,638 kilometers away from you at this point. Further, nobody has actually ever reached this point yet in all of history, so if you want to become an explorer and put your name down in the history books alongside Magellan, then get out there and reach it first. And finally, and most terrifying of all, the most remote point and furthest away from the rest of humanity that you can likely ever achieve is deep in the Pacific Ocean, which for reference on a globe looks like this and almost takes up half of everything you see.
It looks like a water world.
This exact point here is known as Point Nemo and is by far the most remote place on the planet. The closest inhabited land to you at this point would be Easter Island, which is a mind-boggling 2,689 kilometers away.
And that's in the middle of the ocean. And I think they're about to bring up the United States of America, which is absolutely insane. That it's like bigger than the United States of America. It could probably fit inside of there, and you could literally travel on a boat. You could go around, and you wouldn't find any land. There's no islands. There's no continents. There's no states. There's no nothing. There's nothing out there.
To put that into perspective again, that is about 64% of the distance from the US West Coast to East Coast, with not a single other person and just vast, empty ocean. If you think that possibly some shipping routes or cargo ships may pass by to help, then here is a map of what these trade routes look like. Notice the dark points around not only here, but also the point that we discussed earlier in the Arctic Ocean and Bouvet Island over here. The record for the fastest time that anybody has ever made it to Point Nemo was on a boat, and it still took 15 days, 10 hours, and 37 minutes to reach.
15
plus all
days?
of that time to make it back from where they originated from.
Are you joking?
It's weird to think that if you were at this point sitting in a boat alone, the closest other humans to you would actually be the astronauts on board the International Space Station, as they occasionally orbit the Earth above you. The station orbits at a maximum of 416 kilometers above the Earth's surface, which is far closer than the 2,689 kilometers needed to reach Easter Island.
I don't even know if like that has settled in for some of you guys, but that's crazy, dude. That literally the closest people would be astronauts that aren't even close to being on the ground. They're floating in space, legit kilometers above you. You can look up and be like, hey, I'm down here. And you guys are the closest humans to me right now. I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's crazy.
In fact, the space station would be the closest humans to you at several of these other locations as well. But here, especially if you were stranded, then they would be too far away for help.
I mean,
the fastest anybody could possibly reach you would take over 15 days. The closest help you could get yourself would be the same as venturing nearly 2/3 of the way across the United States.
On a boat.
To top everything off, the Lovecraftian city of R'lyeh is located not too far away from this point, so you may have far worse things than sheer isolation to worry about at this point.
No. We don't talk about that.
Said,
that was amazing. So that's how far we could possibly get from any other person on planet Earth. I'll meet you guys there.